there, and welcome. Well, here we are, meeting together again, and today I want to talk to you about something at which I had zero talent, and yet I ended up having to do it occasionally. Fundraising. Now, almost every teacher at one time or another is going to have to be involved with fundraising for either extracurricular activities or class activities or something like that. And my first bit of advice is, unless you're talented and oriented toward handling that kind of thing, avoid it if you possibly can. Fundraising is a horrible, wormy challenge that doesn't get easier just because you're dealing with small amounts of money. Oftentimes, public school activities and public schools themselves are underfunded, so extracurricular activities have to invest in fundraising. And it's not a lot of money, but it's a lot of responsibility. I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. I have a friend who's very wealthy. She's so wealthy, in fact, that one of her family's employees embezzled $1 million from them, and it took that much embezzling for them to notice it was going on. That's how wealthy they were. They had so much money that they didn't notice any missing until $1 million of it was gone. So, let's think about something as small as $20. $20 is not much. If you make $1,000 a week, if $20 goes missing, it's probably not going to bother you all that much. If you make $100 a week and $20 go missing, that's a fifth of your income. So you're going to notice. And it's for that reason that even small fundraising campaigns can present real challenges to teachers, especially because it's easy for somebody to abscond with $20. It happens. And what you want to do is avoid being anywhere near such petty larceny, okay? However, if you do end up having to do it, there are some ways to minimize your exposure to temptation and to hurt reputation by the way you handle your fundraising. So I'm going to go back to my original advice for sponsoring extracurriculars or classes or activities, things like that. Have a fellow sponsor, if at all possible, even if it's not another teacher. It might be a parent and you working together, but it's very helpful to have another qualified adult involved, especially if it's fundraising, okay? That helps protect you, and it helps you deal with any kind of crisis that might come up, and crises might come up. I'll give you an example of how a fundraising thing can turn into a headache really quickly, and then I'll give you the last little bits of advice. I was National Honor Society sponsor in more than one school, and in one of the schools that I sponsored, the kids sold pizzas to their fellow students in the evenings. And so it was a brisk business. They would buy the pizzas at cost from a local pizza joint and then sell them at school. So this was an approved activity, them doing this because they were making money for a scholarship fund. One of the things I discovered was a previous sponsor had not even attended while these kids were handling money. That's a mistake. Don't ever do that. If your students are going to be handling cash money, you need an adult there supervising. It's important. So that should not happen. The other thing that I discovered was they didn't have a careful process for how the orders were taken and the pizzas were delivered. So I made a couple of rules that we adhered to very stringently. We did not do printed receipts. If you wonder why every single store in the world uses printed receipts, it's because it's record keeping. It helps people who are dealing with money keep track of that money. But a lot of times in fundraisers, there aren't printed receipts. There are in some of them, like tickets and things like that. But if you don't have printed receipts and you're dealing with cash money, it can be harrowing. So these kids were selling these pizzas for cash money. And one of the things I changed was we turn in the money we get from the night sales. What a previous teacher who didn't attend did was said, whatever the number is that you have at the end of the night has to be the correct number of dollars to deposit for the number of pizzas you sold. That's all. So if you're short or you're over, fix it. If you're over, just keep the extra. If you're short, you have to pay in. Now, I'm sure this teacher that arranged this thought that was a perfectly reasonable way to do it, but quite frankly, it's fraudulent and you shouldn't do it that way. It tempts students to misrepresent things, and it tempts students to overcharge their classmates, which is also unjust. So no. The second thing is you should never have someone handling money handle food. So the way I set up the system was students would order from the money handler, they would pay the money handler, and the money handler would tell the pizza deliverer how many to give. The pizza handler never touched the money handler never touched the pizza. The first reason for this is hygiene. Cash money especially is the dirtiest stuff in the world, but even credit cards and stuff like that can be dirty. But cash money is filthy. This also meant that all the calculating was done by one student and kept tracked of by one student, and the other student made sure that the pizzas went out correctly to the people. We usually landed very close to the right number. Sometimes we landed exactly right. But the reality is when you're dealing with cash money, change can be misdelivered, and you can overcharge or undercharge people without even meaning to. With me standing there supervising what was going on, students still made mistakes, okay? And they were not malicious mistakes, they weren't on purpose, they just happened. So we never misrepresented our deposit. We deposited the money we made. If it was under, so be it. If it was over, so be it. And we tried our best to not let that happen. So we had a very good record, only a couple of dollars one way or another, over 100 pizzas at most, maybe 50 cents, maybe $1, and sometimes perfectly even. But cash money is tricky, it's hard to deal with, and even if you're an experienced worker in the concessions game, you can have messed up cash drawers. So, let's say that you're doing something with money, with fundraising. There are some things that you can do to help yourself do it well and not do it fraudulently. So the first thing you do is you need to sit down and have a plan for how the money will be turned in to you, tallied, and deposited. You need to have a carefully thought out plan of how you're going to do it, including where and when that's going to happen. It's got to be the same every time, and you have to be tidy. Now, you can be a messy teacher and do excellent things. Messy classrooms yield wonderful things sometimes. Messy classrooms are usually an indication of things going on. It's hard to keep neat and tidy when you're busy working. Sometimes things get moved and put out of place and stuff like that. But with money, tidiness is all. So that pattern of turning in money, tallying it, and even putting it away. Let's say you can't deposit it immediately into the hands of accountant or banking, then you must always store it exactly the same way. And your adherence to this pattern must verge on religious zealotry. You have to do it the same way every single time, because money will want to go missing. And the minute that happens, your head is going to explode. So you have to follow that pattern, and you have to adhere to that pattern. So if a kid comes in and says, I missed the tally and I need to give you this money now, no. You be prepared to say no. You're going to have to hold on to that until X moment when I can accept that tally again, because I only accept that money at this time, in this place, in this way. Now, you can set it up to do it several nights, several days, one day, however you're going to do it with the fundraising you're doing, but you must be absolutely tidy, organized, and strict about it, because otherwise it'll go missing. And because there's so little money involved, even a really successful fundraising campaign for a school can oftentimes yield very little money. Because there is so little money involved, every dime counts. Every little bit of income counts. So you don't want to mishandle it at all. Finally, it is the way of the world that people who are in charge of money begin to forget that it's not their money. Schools do this, businesses do this, governments do this. The money gathered for fundraising is for the purposes of promoting the club and the students. It's not for the teacher or sponsor. It is not your money, even if you work hard to tally it, deposit it, keep track of it. It's not your money. It's an organization's money, and therefore subject to forces of which you have no control. But even if you're an accountant in a bank, if you're a banker, the money in the deposits does not belong to you. Never forget, it's not your money. As long as you keep that clear in your mind, you're less likely to make big mistakes with it. You're less likely to promise it in more than one place, which is a danger, and I've seen teachers do. So, if you can, avoid the money game. Let someone else deal with it, unless you're really talented with money and you feel a calling to help with it. And if you help with it, if you work with money, be organized, be tidy, and be responsible. It is not your money, it is your stewardship, which means it's not your belonging, it's your responsibility. That's it for today. I hope you have a glorious rest of the day, and I'm sorry if this money talk bored you, you gorgeous people.